It wasn't me.
There was only one name that mattered: Bumpy Johnson.
In 1964, Sugar Hill wasn't just a zip code in Harlem. It was a statement. It was a limestone and brick proof that black success wasn't just a pipe dream in America. It was a tangible, breathing business. If you stood on the corner of Edgecombe Avenue on a Sunday afternoon, the air didn't reek of exhaust and grease from 125th Street. It smelled of jasmine, expensive French perfume, and the crisp, clean wind coming off the Hudson River. This was the high ground. This was where the heavy hitters lived: the doctors, the lawyers, the judges, and the jazz legends. It was a fortress of class, a world of silk gloves and fine china, built high above the dirt and the grind of the city below. And sitting right in the center of that world, presiding over a garden party that looked like a movie set, was Mamie Johnson. To the civilians, she was just Mrs. Johnson, a woman of high taste and quiet dignity. But to anyone who knew the real layout of power in New York City, Mamie was the queen of Harlem, not because she was loud. She never raised her voice above a whisper. Not because she was violent. She left the dirty work to her husband. She was the queen because she carried a grace so absolute, so cold, that it made even the hardest men in the city take off their hats and watch their mouths when she walked by. She was the velvet glove on Bumpy Johnson's iron fist, the only person alive who could leash the animal inside the most dangerous man in New York. On this particular Sunday, the garden behind Dr. Louisa Hill's place was buzzing with the low hum of business and the sound of silver spoons hitting bone china. The sun was warm, cutting through the oak leaves and dropping gold on the grass. Mamie was wearing a floral dress, imported from Paris, cut from silk so fine it moved around her like smoke. She wore white gloves to her elbows and a wide hat that hid her eyes. She looked perfect. She looked healthy. She looked untouchable. But in Bumpy Johnson's line of work, safety is just a lie we tell ourselves. It was a thin sheet of glass over a deep grave. And on this perfect afternoon, that glass was about to break. Moving through the crowd of high society women was a waiter. He was young, clean-cut, with slicked hair and a white jacket that hung a little loose on his shoulders. He carried a heavy silver pitcher of iced water, condensation dripping off the metal, moving table to table with a practiced, fake smile. To the ladies, he was invisible. He was just scenery, a piece of moving furniture, the help. But if you looked close, really close, you would see his collar was damp with sweat, even though the weather was mild. You would see his eyes weren't watching the glasses he poured. They kept snapping toward the head table, where Mamie sat. The kid wasn't from Harlem. He wasn't a local looking for tuition money. He was a mechanic from a crew in Hell's Kitchen, a guy who fixed problems for cash, no questions asked. He took $5,000 up front for a simple job. He didn't know Mamie Johnson's background. He didn't know her husband was Bumpy Johnson, the man who ran Alcatraz like his own private living room. If the waiter knew who the real target was, he would have dropped that pitcher, jumped the fence, and ran until his heart exploded. But he didn't know. He just knew he owed a shark, and this job cleared the ledger. He walked up to the head table. Mamie was laughing, softly at some story from a heart surgeon's wife. It was light, musical, the sound of a woman who thought she was safe. The waiter stepped close, casting a shadow over the white linen. "More water, ma'am?" he asked. His voice was steady, rehearsed. Mamie looked up and smiled. It was the real thing. A smile that treated a server the same as a senator. "Yes, thank you," she said. As he leaned in to pour, he stumbled. It was a small slip, a moment of bad balance. His hip hit the table edge, rattling the silver. A linen napkin he had tucked in his belt fluttered to the ground, landing in the grass right by Mamie's chair. "Oh, pardon me, ma'am," the waiter said, looking terrified. He stepped back, gripping the pitcher. "So clumsy of me. Please forgive me. It's quite all right. Mamie said, turning back to her friends, dismissing it. Accidents happen. The waiter bent down to get the napkin. He dropped to one knee, vanishing from the other guest's sightline. The heavy tablecloth covered him, making a tent of privacy, a blind spot in the middle of the crowded garden. In that split second, his hand didn't go for the linen. It went to his own sleeve. Hidden inside the cuff of his white jacket, strapped to his arm with leather bands, was a device that looked like a fountain pen. But it wasn't a pen. It was a piece of engineering, designed by a chemist who worked for the OSS during the war. It was a spring-loaded syringe, silent and lethal. Inside the glass ampule was a pure dose of Digitalis, stripped from the foxglove plant. In small amounts, it was medicine for the heart. It made it beat stronger. But in a concentrated dose, shot straight into the muscle, it was a chaotic bomb. It would send the heart into a wild spasm, break the rhythm, and stop it cold. The waiter moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He found Mamie's leg in the shadows under the table. He pressed the tip against her inner thigh, right through the expensive fabric of her dress. Click! It was a tiny sound, lost under the party chatter. The needle fired, injected the toxin, and retracted in less than a second. Above the table, Mamie flinched. She gasped, a sharp breath in, and dropped her silver spoon. The china rattled against the saucer, a sharp crack that silenced the room like a pistol slide snapping shut. Every dame at the table froze. Mamie, Mrs. Sterling, the Sawbones' wife, leaned in close. "You holding up?" Mamie rubbed her thigh, mild confusion clouding her eyes as she felt a sharp, biting sting, a sudden burn that flared hot and angry for a split second before vanishing into the flesh. "Something nipped me," she frowned, brushing it off. "A bug, maybe." The waiter resurfaced from beneath the table, the napkin clutched in his fist. His face was a perfect mask of innocence, eyes wide with worry. "Everything okay, ma'am? Did I catch you with the chair leg down there? My deepest apologies." Mamie studied him, seeing only a kid terrified of getting the sack. She forced a smile, hiding the sudden, sick wave rolling in her gut like a rising tide. "No, forget it," she said, waving a dismissal. "Just a pinch. It's gone now." Scram. The waiter bowed, gripping that napkin like a winning ticket, and backed into the sea of pastel skirts and sun hats. He marched straight through the garden, cut through the kitchen, and slipped out the back to a black sedan idling in the alley like a hearse. As the wheels screeched toward the Triborough Bridge, the kid finally let out a breath. The job was done. Time was running out. Back at the table, Mamie reached for her cup, but her hand betrayed her. She stared at those shaking fingers, watching them quiver like they belonged to a stranger. Strange, Mamie Johnson didn't shake. She was iron. Then, a flush of heat crawled up her neck, a suffocating fire that made her collar feel like a tightening garrote. The garden, vibrant a second ago, began to fade. The flowers turned to ash gray. The chatter of the women warped, sounding hollow and distant, like a phonograph dragging on the needle. "Ma'am?" The voice was urgent now. A hand gripped her shoulder. "You're pale. I ain't right," Mamie whispered. Her own voice sounded thick, like she was speaking through water. "Need air. You are outside, Mamie." Mrs. Sterling's voice spiked with panic. Mamie tried to rise. She needed the powder room, cold water, composure. A queen of Harlem doesn't show cracks in the armor, but her legs were dead weight. Then, a pain like a railroad spike, driven by a sledgehammer, slammed into her chest. It shot down her left arm, numbing the nerves. She clawed at the tablecloth, dragging crystal glasses down with a crash, spilling iced tea across the white linen like fresh blood. A vase of roses shattered on the stones. Mamie Johnson went down. No movie star faint here. She hit the turf with a sickening, heavy thud, her hat tumbling into the dirt. The party exploded into bedlam. Screams tore the air. Chairs toppled as the ladies scrambled to help. The surgeon's wife hit her knees, forgetting her fancy dress. She tore open Mamie's collar, fingers pressing into Mamie's neck, hunting for life. What she found turned her blood cold. The rhythm was all wrong, fluttering like a trapped moth, pounding like a hammer. Then nothing. "Get an ambulance!" she shrieked, voice breaking. "Call Harlem Hospital. Tell him it's her ticker. Her heart." Mamie stared blindly at the oak leaves overhead. The world spun, vision tunneling to yellow rot. She tried to say his name Bumpy, but her tongue was lead. The dark rushed in from the edges, devouring the light and sound until only the traitorous thumping of her own heart remained. 20 blocks away, in the smoky shadows of the Blue Lounge back room, Bumpy Johnson studied the board. Silence reigned, a fortress against the street noise. Bumpy sat on his throne of leather, cigar smoldering, scotch waiting. Across from him sat Councilman Powell, a man who thought votes made him king of Harlem. Bumpy knew the score. Power didn't come from a ballot box. You take it by force, and you hold it by will. Bumpy was winning. He slid his rook with a soft click, cornering the man's king. "Check," Bumpy murmured. His voice was a low, confident rumble. "You're a devil, Johnson," the councilman grunted, eyeing the trap. "Thought I had you. You were playing the man, not the board," Bumpy said, lifting his glass. "Fatal mistake." He took a sip, smooth, rich, the taste of being on top. Business was quiet. The Italians were staying on their side of the fence. The cops were bought, and Mamie was out with the high society broads. For a gangster, this was paradise. Then, the door didn't just open, it exploded inward. A violent breach that slammed the heavy wood against the wall with a crack like thunder. Bumpy's hand snapped to the heater mounted under the table, eyes turning to ice. It was Zip, Bumpy's shadow. The man never ran, never yelled, never felt a thing. He was a machine built of silence and loyalty. But today, the machine was broken. Chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. He ignored the politician completely. He marched to the table. "Bumpy," Zip said. The boss froze. He knew that tone. He'd heard it only a handful of times. It was the sound of tragedy. He slowly released the grip on his gun. "What?" The word hung heavy in the smoke. "It's Mamie," Zip said. The name hit harder than a hollow point. She dropped at the tea party. Harlem Hospital took her. The driver, he says it's grim. Bumpy, says she couldn't catch her breath. Bumpy didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He didn't finish the scotch. He rose, a movement so violent it sent the heavy chessboard crashing to the floor. Kings and pawns scattered into the darkness, calm amidst the storm. "Move," Bumpy ordered. He exited the club. He moved with a swiftness that mocked his years. He stepped onto the pavement under the blinding afternoon sun. His ride, a black Cadillac Fleetwood, idled at the curb. The driver caught Bumpy's expression and fired the engine instantly. "Harlem Hospital," Bumpy growled as he slid inside. "Get me there in 5 minutes or I end you myself." The driver offered no debate. He stomped on the pedal. The Cadillac screamed, rubber burning, trailing a cloud of blue smoke. They tore through the veins of Harlem. They blew past red lights. They swerved into oncoming traffic to overtake a truck. Bumpy sat in the rear, staring dead ahead. His face was a statue of stone, but his grip on the leather crushed the armrest until his knuckles turned bone white. "Not Mimi," he silently pleaded. "Take the cash, take the turf, take my life, but spare her. Do not take her." They hit the hospital in 4 minutes flat. Bumpy didn't wait for a full stop. He kicked the door open and hit the ground running. He crashed through the main gates of Harlem Hospital, a hurricane in a tailored suit. The hospital was a fortress of brick and sorrow, reeking of antiseptic and decay. The receptionist jumped, startled, as Bumpy Johnson bulldozed past the desk. "Sir, listen, you cannot just go up there," she hollered. Bumpy didn't even twitch. He knew exactly where the ICU lay. 3rd floor. He took the stairs 2 at a time, breath tearing from his lungs. He smashed through the double doors of intensive care. A nurse, built like a tank, blocked his path. "Mr. Johnson, you are forbidden here," she stated firmly. Bumpy halted. He stared at her. He offered no threats. He simply pierced her with eyes that had witnessed the darkest pits of solitary confinement. "Move aside," he whispered. The nurse retreated. Bumpy scanned the corridor. He spotted a gathering of white coats outside. Room 304, doctors. They conversed in low murmurs, shaking their heads. Their expressions carried weight. They looked like men who had already surrendered. Bumpy approached them. He fixed his jacket. He straightened his tie. He crushed the rising panic into a tight knot in his stomach. He became the king once more. "Where is my wife?" he demanded. The doctors turned. The center figure was a giant with silver hair and wire spectacles. Dr. Sterling, the chief of cardiology, a man of science, a man of status, wearing his arrogance like armor. He knew Bumpy's face. Every soul in Harlem did. But in this house, Bumpy held no crown. Sterling did. "Mr. Johnson," Sterling spoke, his tone sharp and clinical. "I apologize. We are doing our utmost." "What happened?" Bumpy asked. "She was fine at dawn. She was perfect. It appears to be a massive myocardial infarction," Dr. Sterling declared, using Latin words to build a barricade between himself and the mobster. "A heart attack, a catastrophic one. Her pulse has crashed. Her rhythm is anarchy. She is in a coma." "A heart attack?" Bumpy repeated, trying to force logic into the chaos. "She is barely 40. She eats greens. She walks daily. She does not have heart failures. That is an old man's curse." "Mr. Johnson, cardiac events can be congenital," Sterling spoke, shifting to a tone of patronizing pity. "Hidden flaws, stress. It strikes the young, too. We have her on stimulants, but you must steel yourself. The ruin of the heart muscle is extensive. Her brain has been starved of oxygen. I do not believe she will ever wake." Bumpy stared at him. The words deflected off his chest. "Prepare yourself. Make your peace." Those were phrases for civilians, not for Bumpy Johnson. He wanted to seize the doctor by the throat and crush until he retracted the sentence. He wanted to shake the life back into his woman. "I want to see her," Bumpy stated. "She is unconscious," Sterling said, barring the door. "She will not know you are there, and we need to monitor," I said. Bumpy whispered, leaning close enough for the doctor to smell the scotch and the murder on his breath. "I want to see her." Sterling hesitated. He glanced at his colleagues, then stepped aside. 5 minutes, he yielded. Bumpy entered the room. It was pitch black, illuminated only by the rhythmic, mechanical pulse of the machines. The air was freezing and reeked of ozone. Mamie lay in the bed, looking impossibly fragile. Her skin, usually rich and vibrant, was ash gray. Tubes snaked into her nose. An IV line was taped to the delicate flesh of her arm. The heart monitor chirped a slow, weak, jagged rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. It was the sound of a countdown. Bumpy dragged a metal chair to the bedside. The legs shrieked against the linoleum tiles. He sat heavy. He took her hand. It was cold, lifeless. He rubbed it between his own massive, scarred palms, trying to force the warmth back into her blood. "Baby," he whispered, his voice fracturing. "Mamie, I am here. I am right here." She did not twitch. Her chest rose and fell only by the machine's command. Bumpy sat there for an eternity. He replayed the hours, the morning brew, the goodbye kiss. She was happy. She was strong. A heart attack? It defied logic. It broke the pattern. Bumpy was a man who lived by patterns. In the numbers racket, in the street wars, patterns meant survival. Deviations from the pattern signaled a trap. Mamie suffering a heart failure was a deviation. He eyed the monitor. He eyed the doctor, Sterling, who returned to check the line. Sterling checked the chart and shook his head, a performance of professional defeat. "You certain?" Bumpy asked, eyes downcast. "You certain it is her heart?" Dr. Sterling sighed, irritated. "Mr. Johnson, the EKG is absolute. The blood enzymes confirm massive trauma to the heart muscle. It is a textbook cardiac event. Please cease looking for a villain. Sometimes the enemy is simply biology. Bumpy gave no reply. He just burned holes into his wife with his gaze. Textbook. He despised that word. I need a moment, Bumpy said. Alone. Mr. Johnson, we truly must depart. The doctor stiffened until he saw the darkness in Bumpy's eyes. It was a look that promised a grave. He signaled the nurse. They vacated the room. The lock engaged with a final click behind them, leaving Bumpy alone with the silence and the rhythmic beeping. He rose to his feet. He gazed down at Mamie. "If you can hear me," he whispered, his voice like steel, "you fight. You hear me? You fight. I will handle the rest." He began his inspection. This was not a sentimental caress. It was an investigation. Bumpy Johnson knew the language of violence. He knew exactly what trauma looked like. He knew that the body never lied. If this was natural, fine. He would accept it. He would mourn. But if this was something else, he checked her arms. He turned them over with gentle precision. No bruises, no defensive wounds, no marks from where someone might have grabbed her. He moved to her neck, smooth, no redness, no signs of a garrote or struggle. He checked her face. Her lips were blue from oxygen deprivation, but the swelling was absent. No scent of almonds or chemicals on her breath. He pulled the sheet down to examine her torso. Did she fall? Did she strike something when she collapsed? Nothing. He moved to her legs. He lifted the hem of the floral dress. He examined her right leg. Smooth. Perfect. He looked at her left leg, and then he saw it. It was minuscule. So small that a doctor convinced he was treating a heart attack would never even think to look for it. It sat halfway up her inner thigh, on the soft skin above the knee. A single, small red dot. It was not a scratch. It was not an insect bite. It was a puncture. Bumpy froze. The world ground to a halt. The beeping of the monitor faded into nothingness. He leaned in closer. He reached over and angled the bedside lamp, casting a harsh beam onto her leg. Around that tiny red dot, the skin was slightly raised and pale, and encircling that, a faint, ghostly ring of purple was beginning to take shape. A bruise. He touched it gently with the tip of his finger. The muscle underneath felt hard, knotted. Bumpy knew exactly what a needle mark felt like. He controlled the heroin trade in Harlem. He had seen thousands of track marks on thousands of junkies. He knew the difference between a scratch and an injection site. But this was not the work of a junkie. This was clean. This was precise. And it was in a location, the inner thigh, where no doctor would ever inject a patient in an emergency, and certainly not at a tea party. He looked at the mark. He looked at the supposed heart attack victim. The pieces slammed together in his mind with the force of a head-on collision. She was at a party. She was unguarded. She collapsed. The doctors said heart failure, but the leg screamed needle. Heart attacks do not leave puncture wounds. The rage that hit him was ice cold. It was not the fiery temper of a street brawl. It was the absolute zero of a judge passing a death sentence. This was not nature. This was not God calling an angel home. This was a hit. Someone had touched his wife. Someone had stuck a needle into the Queen of Harlem. Bumpy stood up. He seemed to grow taller in the room. He felt the weight of the steel on his hip, and for the first time that day, it brought him comfort. He walked to the door. He threw it wide open. Dr. Sterling was standing at the nurse's station down the hall, writing on a clipboard, laughing at a remark. That laughter was like gasoline on Bumpy's fuse. "Doctor!" Bumpy's voice boomed down the corridor. It was not a shout. It was a lion's roar. It stopped every nurse, orderly, and patient dead in their tracks. The hospital fell silent. Sterling looked up, startled. He adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Johnson, please. I must insist you lower your voice. This is a place of healing. Get in here." Bumpy commanded. He pointed a finger at the ground. Now, Sterling sighed, an exaggerated show of patience being tested. He walked back toward the room. What is it this time? Has her condition changed? I told you, the coma is likely permanent. Bumpy seized the doctor by the lapels of his pristine white coat. He didn't just grab him, he launched him. He slammed the doctor against the wall of the private room. A metal tray of instruments clattered to the floor with a deafening crash. "You are insane," Sterling gasped, his feet dangling inches off the tiles. "Let me go! I will call the police!" "Call them," Bumpy growled, his face inches from the man's. "Call them all! But first, look!" Bumpy dragged the doctor to the bedside. He pointed to the thigh. "What is that?" Sterling squinted, terrified, struggling for air. "What? That? It looks like, I don't know, an insect bite? A blemish?" "Mr. Johnson, her heart is failing. A skin irritation is hardly relevant. It is a puncture," Bumpy hissed. "It is a needle mark. Someone stuck her." "Don't be ridiculous," Sterling scoffed, trying to regain his dignity despite the gangster's hand crushing his silk tie. "She was at a tea party. Who would stick her? And with what?" "It is paranoia, Mr. Johnson. You are grieving, and you are imagining conspiracies." "I know what a needle looks like," Bumpy stated. "And I know what poison looks like." Her heart did not just stop. Someone stopped it. "There is no poison," Sterling shouted. "It is a myocardial infarction." Bumpy slammed him against the wall again. The doctor's glasses skittered across the floor. "You are going to run a toxicology screen," Bumpy spoke, his voice terrifyingly calm now. "You are going to draw her blood, and you are going to look for digitalis. You are going to look for arsenic. You are going to look for cyanide. You are going to look for everything. That isn't supposed to be there. I can't just order tests on a hunch," Sterling cried. "The hospital administrator." "I don't give a damn about the administrator," Bumpy said. He reached into his jacket. He didn't pull a gun. He pulled a switchblade. He flicked it open. The steel glinted cold under the fluorescent lights. He began to clean his fingernails with the tip of the blade, fixing the doctor with dead eyes. "You have 30 seconds to draw that blood, doctor, or the only thing the police are going to find in this room is you." Sterling looked at the knife. He looked at Bumpy. He looked at the woman in the bed. And for the first time, the arrogance cracked. He looked at the mark on the thigh again. He saw the purple ring. He saw the swelling, and the medical part of his brain, the part that wasn't blinded by class and prejudice, whispered a terrifying possibility. "Injection site." "Nurse!" Sterling shouted, his voice cracking into a squeak. "Nurse! Get a tox kit, stat, and get the crash cart." Bumpy released him. Sterling collapsed against the wall, his lungs burning as he gasped for oxygen. He stared at the king of Harlem with the terror of a prey animal. "If I am right," Bumpy whispered, turning his back to the doctor, "and if I find the hand that moved against her, you better pray for their souls, Doc, because I will show no mercy." Bumpy Johnson stood as the immovable guardian over his wife. He had exposed the deception. He had halted the Reaper's scythe. Now, the waiting game began. And in that silence, the godfather of Harlem began to draft a blueprint for war. The hospital waiting room felt like a purgatory of cold tiles and harsh lights. Bumpy Johnson sat on a plastic throne far too small for his presence. His eyes drilled into the wall clock, the second hand sweeping with a mechanical cruelty that made his blood boil. Tick. Each second was a heartbeat stolen from his wife. Each minute stretched into an eternity. Zip stood by the exit, a statue of loyalty. He did not sit. He did not speak. He simply monitored the corridor, his hand hovering near the steel tucked under his jacket. The nurses steered clear. They could smell the danger. It radiated from him like heat from a furnace. 1 hour had passed since Bumpy had pinned Dr. Sterling against the masonry like an insect. 60 minutes since the blood was drawn. An hour of suffocating silence. Finally, the double doors parted. Dr. Sterling emerged from the depths. The man was changed. The arrogance that once coated him like armor was gone, stripped away by the terrifying truth he now held in his trembling hand. His face was ghost white, his spectacles sat crooked. He clutched the clipboard to his chest like a fragile shield. He refused to look at the staff. His gaze locked onto Bumpy, and in those eyes, the king saw the verdict before a single syllable was uttered. It was pure terror, unadulterated dread. Bumpy rose to his feet. He did not rush. He advanced on the doctor with the crushing momentum of a landslide. "Speak," Bumpy commanded. Sterling gulped down a lump of fear. He scanned the hall for eavesdroppers, then dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your intuition was correct." The sentence hung heavy in the air. Bumpy did not blink. There was no victory here, only a cold, dark confirmation. Digitalis. Sterling's voice quivered. "The toxicity levels are off the scale. This was no natural failure, Mr. Johnson. It was an assassination attempt. A massive, lethal dose injected straight into her veins." Bumpy's eyes narrowed. "The antidote? We administered atropine and potassium. The moment the test confirmed it," Sterling stammered, sweating. "It neutralizes the toxin. It stabilizes the electrical rhythm of the heart. Her pulse is already normalizing. She will survive." Sterling exhaled shakily. "I believe so. If we had delayed even 60 minutes, if you hadn't demanded that test, she would be a corpse. The damage would have been permanent." Bumpy gave a single, slow nod. He laid a heavy hand on the physician's shoulder. Sterling flinched, anticipating pain, but felt only a vice-like grip. "You did well, Doc," Bumpy stated, his voice low. "You did your duty. Now, wipe this day from your memory. Forget the needle. Forget the toxin. The official chart reads heart attack. Is that clear? But that is a felony," Sterling protested weakly. "The police report." "I am the police," Bumpy interrupted. His tone was flat, absolute. "I am the judge, and tonight I am the executioner. Involving the law makes this messy, and you do not want my life to get messy. You want to return home to your wife and children." Sterling peered into Bumpy's soul and saw the abyss staring back. He nodded slowly. "Heart attack," he whispered in defeat. "Good man," Bumpy said, releasing his prey. "Keep her alive. If her heart stops, yours stops." Bumpy turned to his shadow. The enforcer stepped into the light. "She pulls through," Bumpy announced. Zip let out a heavy breath. "Thank God." "Now," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a subterranean growl, "we hunt the man who held the weapon." They exited the sterile hospital into the biting night air. The city buzzed with ignorant life, unaware that a blood feud had just been christened. Bumpy ignited a cigarette. His hands were steady as stone. Panic was gone. Only the job remained. "The caterers," Bumpy said. "Goldie sourced the info while I stood watch. Prestige Catering out of Hell's Kitchen, run by a lowlife named Sal." "Sal the Rat?" Zip asked. "The very same," Bumpy confirmed. "Let's pay our old friend a visit." The drive to Hell's Kitchen was a funeral procession. The Cadillac glided through the streets like a predator in dark waters. They curbed the car before a grimy storefront. The sign read, "Prestige Catering and Events." The windows were dark. The entrance was barred. Bumpy didn't bother knocking. He glanced at Zip. The enforcer nodded, wound up, and drove his heel into the wood. The lock shattered with a deafening crack. The door groaned open. They stepped into the gloom. The front was a graveyard of folded chairs, but in the back office, a solitary light burned. Bumpy marched toward the glow. Sal sat counting his dirty money, a greaseball who played the Irish against the Italians, loyal only to the highest bidder. The Rat looked up at the sound, snatching a baseball bat from the corner. He froze instantly when the devil himself appeared in the doorway. "Bumpy?" Sal's voice squeaked. What is this?" "I'm closed for business." Bumpy rounded the desk. He plucked the bat from Sal's grip and tossed it like garbage. It clattered uselessly away. He seized Sal by his cheap collar and hauled him up, slamming him back down onto the desk. Coins and bills exploded like confetti. The tea party, Bumpy hissed. Sugar Hill. Today. I don't follow, Sal stammered, trembling. We do a dozen gigs. My wife was at that event, Bumpy said, his voice ice cold, and one of your staff tried to end her life. Sal's eyes bulged. End her? Bumpy, no, never. My boys are pros. We serve crab cakes. We don't do hits. One of them did. Bumpy leaned in, his face inches from the rat. A kid, white jacket, slick hair, shaking hands. I had a call-in, Sal cried out. My regular, Tommy. He called in sick with the flu this morning. I had a hole to fill. A guy walked in off the street looking for a wage. He claimed he knew the trade. A name? Bumpy demanded. He gave the name Johnny. Johnny Hooks, from the west side. Johnny Hooks. Bumpy memorized the name. And I assume he didn't clock out? No, Sal admitted. He vanished the second the job was done. Bumpy, I swear on my mother's grave, I didn't know. If I knew it was your lady, you took cash to hire a ghost. Bumpy cut him off. You got sloppy, Sal. Because you were careless. My queen sleeps in darkness. Bumpy's hand hovered over the heavy iron stapler on the desk. He measured the distance to Sal's trembling fingers. Thwack! A guttural shriek tore through the office as metal pierced flesh and bone. Consider that a receipt for incompetence, Bumpy stated, his voice devoid of warmth. Now, give me Johnny Hooks. I swear I don't know, Sal wailed, cradling his mutilated hand. He was just a temp. Use your brain before I use this again, Bumpy warned, lifting the weapon. Wait, the application. He left a contact number for emergency shifts. It is in the cabinet. Zip was already tearing through the steel drawers. Found it. Zip held up the paper like a death warrant. Boarding house in the Bronx, 163rd Street. Bumpy let the stapler clatter to the desk. He straightened Sal's sweat-stained collar with terrifying gentleness. Breathe a word of this, Bumpy whispered, and next time I bring a nail gun. They left the snitch weeping in his own mess and slid into the black sedan. The Bronx was a trek, but the night had only just begun to bleed. The safe house was a rotting brownstone, reeking of boiled cabbage and old regrets. The gatekeeper was a hag with plastic curlers tight against her scalp. Cigarette ash dusted her lip. She blocked the way until Zip flashed a crisp Benjamin Franklin. The barrier vanished. Room 4B, she grunted. Top floor. Keep it quiet. They ascended the narrow staircase, the rot-infested wood groaning under Bumpy's dominance. Finally, the target. Room 4B. Amber light leaked from the cracks, accompanied by soft jazz. Bumpy bypassed the kick. He tested the knob. Unlocked. Absolute amateur hour. They ghosted inside. In a room barely fit for rats, the waiter was frantically stuffing a suitcase on the bed. Gone was the white uniform, replaced by street denim and leather. He glanced up, and his soul left his body the moment he locked eyes with Bumpy Johnson. All color drained away. He looked like a walking corpse who knew his time was up. Desperation took over. He lunged for the steel on the dresser. Zip moved like a phantom. He closed the gap and delivered a backhand that cracked like a whip. The kid went airborne, slamming into the plaster. He slid down the wall like wet laundry. Zip confiscated the cheap .22 pea shooter. Bumpy sealed the exit. Click. He loomed over the boy. Barely 22, just a pawn chasing glory. You dropped a napkin at the club, Bumpy stated flatly. Blood painted the kid's chin. He remained mute. I said, you dropped a napkin, Bumpy repeated, his voice dropping an octave. You crawled under the table, and you spiked my wife like a pincushion. I don't know, the kid stammered. I'm just a waiter. Bumpy's shoe connected with his ribs. That wasn't a warning tap. That was a bone-shattering strike. The kid folded, wheezing in agony. We saw the toxicology report, Bumpy hissed. Digitalis. Foxglove extract. A coward's weapon. Who hired you? Go to hell, the kid choked out. Bumpy gave Zip the signal. Zip seized a handful of hair and dragged him to the basin. He cranked the hot tap. He jammed the kid's face into the scalding stream. Screams turned to bubbles as flesh cooked. Zip yanked him up for air. "A name," Zip demanded. "I can't," he spat water. "They will execute me." "Son," Bumpy leaned back, radiating icy calm. "You are confused about your current geography. You are terrified of them. You should be terrified of me. Them is a tomorrow problem. I am your tonight problem. The only variable left is how much you suffer." Bumpy upended the suitcase. Clothes and toiletries scattered, revealing a thick, creamy envelope. He snatched it up. 5 grand cold, hard cash, and a note, short and sweet. "Job done. Meet at Vitale's, 10 post meridian. Full payout. Digitalis, that Italian joint downtown." Bumpy pierced the kid with his gaze. "Who is the meeting with?" The kid shattered completely. "Vinny," he rasped. The air froze. Vinny the Vulture Falcone. A Genovese capo, a lunatic with too much ambition and zero restraint. He had been barking about taking Harlem. Bumpy had dismissed him as a yapping dog, assuming the commission held his leash tight. "Vinny ordered this?" Bumpy asked. "He said you were fading." The kid wept. "He said if he carved out your heart, if he took your queen, you would collapse. He said grief would blind you while he seized the numbers racket." Bumpy stared into the void. "Took out your heart." Sick poetry. It was exactly the kind of rat logic the Vulture operated on. But he made a fatal error. He thought Bumpy broke under sorrow. He didn't know that grief only cleared the path for pure, unadulterated rage. "Zip," Bumpy commanded. "Boss, take this trash to the marshes." Bumpy pointed a finger. "Ensure he never packs a bag again." "No, no, please God," the kid shrieked. I told you everything. You touched the queen," Bumpy whispered. "There is no redemption for that." Zip silenced him with a hammer fist to the temple. He hoisted the dead weight like a sack of garbage. "I will handle disposal," Zip stated. "And you?" Bumpy checked his timepiece. 9:30. "I have a dinner reservation," he said, eyes cold as steel. "At Vitali's." Vitali's was a classic red sauce trap in Little Italy. Checkered cloths, candlelight, and Chianti. The natural habitat of the apex predators. A place for veal parmesan and conspiracy. 10 o'clock. Vinny Falcone held court at the corner table, loud and obnoxious. Thick neck, overpriced suit. He was cackling with his soldiers, swirling wine, checking the clock. He was expecting a payout meeting with Johnny Hooks. He was definitely not expecting the godfather of Harlem. Bumpy entered alone. No coat, no shadows. He stepped through the threshold, and the atmosphere instantly grew heavy. Chatter died. Silverware froze. Even the staff stopped breathing. Bumpy Johnson in Little Italy was a shark invading a community pool. A disruption of nature. Vinny looked up. His grin twitched, then hardened. He didn't draw. His arrogance was his shield. "Bumpy," Vinny roared, arms wide. "To what do I owe the pleasure? You lost?" Bumpy loomed over the table. The 2 buttons, men started to rise, hands sliding toward their heaters. Bumpy didn't even grant them a glance. "Sit down," he commanded. The order was so cold, the muscle froze in place. They looked to Vinny for a sign. Vinny waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, boys. Bumpy here is just paying a visit." "What's the business, Bumpy?" "You want a plate of calamari?" "It's fresh. I'm here to return something," Bumpy stated. "Return something?" Vinny chuckled. "I didn't lend you a dime. You sent me a message," Bumpy cut in, "regarding my wife." Vinny's face went stone cold. The laughter died instantly. "I got no idea what you're talking about." "You sent a punk," Bumpy said, "to a tea party. You ordered him to stop my heart." "You got the wrong guy, Bumpy," Vinny said, eyes hardening like concrete. "I respect the rules. Families are off limits." "The rules are dead," Bumpy replied. "You buried them the moment you touched her." Bumpy reached into his coat. The soldiers flinched, half drawing their iron. But Bumpy didn't pull a piece. He produced a white linen napkin. He tossed it onto the table. It drifted down, landing squarely on Vinny's plate of veal. "You dropped this," Bumpy murmured. Vinny stared at the cloth. He looked genuinely confused. "A napkin? You came all the way down here to hand me a rag?" "Look underneath," Bumpy ordered. Vinny frowned. He reached out to lift the linen. As he did, Bumpy struck. It was the same play the waiter used, the exact same distraction. As Vinny's eyes dipped to the napkin, Bumpy's right hand lashed out. He wasn't holding silver. He gripped the device, the fountain pen syringe taken from the kid's suitcase. Bumpy jammed the needle into the side of Vinny's neck. Click! Vinny gasped, eyes bulging from his skull. He slapped a hand to his neck, but Bumpy had already recoiled. "What? What did you do?" Vinny choked, scrambling up and toppling his chair. The muscle leveled their cannons at Bumpy. "Don't move. You're a dead man. Go ahead and shoot," Bumpy said calmly, raising his hands. "And your boss dies screaming. Or call a meat wagon. Maybe he makes it. Maybe he croaks." Vinny clutched his throat. His face was turning a deep crimson. "Poison," he wheezed. "He poisoned me." "Digitalis," Bumpy clarified. "Concentrated. The exact same dose you fed to her. Only, you're a big fella, Vinny. Maybe your ticker can take it. Maybe it pops like a cheap balloon." Vinny hit his knees, gasping for air. "Help me!" he screamed at his crew. "Get a doc." The soldiers looked at Bumpy, then at their dying boss. Panic seized them. They holstered their heat and grabbed Vinny, dragging him toward the exit. "Call the hospital!" one shouted. Bumpy stood alone at the table. The joint went silent. Every eye was fixed on him. He retrieved the napkin from the table. He folded it with precision. He placed it back down. He scanned the room. "Enjoy your meal," Bumpy said. He turned and walked out. No one stopped him. No one tailed him. He stepped into the cool night air, leaving a dying man and a message that would ring through the 5 boroughs for decades. You never touch the Queen. Bumpy drove back to Harlem Hospital. He walked into room 304. It was dead quiet. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was stronger now. Steady. Beep. Beep. Mamie cracked her eyes open as he entered. She was groggy and pale, but she was still with us. Her eyes locked onto him. "Ellsworth," she whispered. Her voice was like sandpaper. Bumpy pulled the chair close. He sat. He took her hand and kissed it. "I'm right here, baby," he said. "What happened?" she asked. "I was at the party. The tea. I felt sick. You just had a spell," Bumpy said gently. "The doc said it was your heart. A little flutter. But you're tough. You fought it off." Mamie looked at him. She saw the heavy exhaustion in his face. She saw the shadow in his eyes that hadn't faded. She knew her husband. She knew that look. That was the face of a man who had just put a body in the ground. "Ellsworth," she murmured, "did you handle business?" Bumpy smiled. It was a weary smile, but genuine. He reached into his pocket and produced a switchblade. He flicked the steel open and began to gently clean a speck of dirt from under his nail. "The doc said, 'You had a bad heart, baby,'" Bumpy said, staring at the steel. "They were worried it might quit on you." He closed the knife with a violent snap. "But don't worry," Bumpy whispered, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "I fixed the problem. The heart is good now. It's going to beat for a long, long time." Mamie closed her eyes. She squeezed his hand. She asked no more questions. She didn't have to. She was the Queen of Harlem, and her king had just cleared the board. She drifted back to sleep, safe in the knowledge that, while she rested, the devil himself stood guard at the door. Thanks for tuning in, folks. If you enjoyed the ride and want more, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single Bumpy Johnson tale.